That's what they say is the contradiction of the human shield, right?
What is
To
it?
be a human shield, you must have the protection of a civilian.
So I'm not saying that his life was in danger.
No, I'm not saying that. All right. Hi, what's up?
Hey, so I was thinking, just because you're looking at incidences, obviously you'll look at Mosul, but you should also look at the civil war in Sri Lanka towards the end, so the 2009 period, because as the front got increasingly smaller, the Sri Lankan army designated no-fire zones, but then started to shell those no-fire zones profusely, saying that the Tamil Tigers had moved civilians into the no-fire zones to make those no-fire zones human shielded areas. And so that changed the kind of discussion around human shields very much into that proximate area where suddenly it was defined spatially instead of based on intent. So now anyone in the proximate area of a military location can be targeted and lose their civilian status because they're a human shield. But that creates complications for all urban warfare, because obviously, as we saw with Mosul as well, how do you define the limits? Like, as long as ISIS fighters were in Mosul, the entirety of Mosul was considered to be an area that was using human shields. So it becomes really slippery.
I think the argument was that the belligerent then just has to try to take some precautions to allow the people to flee. So I think, wouldn't you say that that precaution has been satisfied if the belligerent is giving notice to the population somehow that they need to leave the area or else?
Well, that was the problem with the end of Sri Lanka, is that the front became so small and the no-fire zones were being attacked, there was nowhere for them to flee. Then
I think in that case, that's why they say, like, I think under the ICC stuff, it's supposed to be like when feasible, right? Is what follows most of this.
Does that mean that in any urban warfare there are no civilians?
No, they're still civilians, but I think that the distinction isn't whether or not they're civilians. The distinction is whether or not it's a military target or a civilian target. Whether or not even if it's declared a military target, there are civilians, you still have to use them in your proportionality calculations.
But if we say that the whole of Mosul is anyone in Mosul is a human shield, right? Not because of intent, not because of the intent of the belligerent, so ISIS, or because of the intent of the people staying there. Just pure proximity to ISIS fighters means that if you are in Mosul, you are a human shield and you have thus lost, to some extent, the strange dichotomy of both requiring the protections of a civilian to be workable as a human shield, but also losing that protection in that you can be put into a calculation of proportionality and be killed, so it is lawful to kill you. So now, just by being near ISIS, you've lost the protections of being a civilian. There's nothing close. It's not like, oh, I was next to a weapon. It's I was in Mosul, or even in Sri Lanka, I was in a no-fire zone.
Wait, where do you get this lose the protections of being a civilian because you're in a city near ISIS? Are you saying if ISIS is in the city?
So everyone in Mosul was considered a human shield because they were in the proximity of ISIS fighters.
Because they didn't leave, or?
Yeah, because they were in Mosul. If you were in Mosul,
sure, then wouldn't the United
shield.
States consider them involuntary human shields?
But what if there are no? Well, this is why I think you need to look at Sri Lanka, because it became this thing where
we'll just focus on for Mosul, because I just read in here that apparently Israel and the United States consider some people like involuntary human shields.
Yeah, but you can't know. So this is why I said I know you want to focus on involuntary, but the reason I said proximate is because the involuntary holding of any person with the intent to make them a human shield means that even the people who aren't being involuntarily held but can't leave for other reasons become classified as human shields. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay. So
just repeat that. Say that one more time.
Yeah. The existence of some involuntary human shields.
Yes.
For people who want to leave but cannot because they are being threatened by a belligerent means that anyone there, whether they are being held involuntarily or not, or they're just choosing not to leave because they live there, they're ill, they're old, for any reason, they are suddenly human shields, even though they were not involuntarily held.
Correct.
So that doesn't seem fair, though, because if human shields traditionally in international law are defined through intent, now international human law just says that a human shield is anyone in the area.
Correct.
So in a place like Sri Lanka at the end of the civil war, so 2009.
What is that word? It sounds like when you say this, you're saying that like there's a huge problem here. Where is the problem, or what is the part that you're saying like, well, this doesn't feel right? Yeah.
The problem is that how do you distinguish who gets the protections of a civilian in an urban conflict?
Gotcha. My understanding is no civilians get protections as long as it's like considered like a military target, that a shield doesn't prevent a target.
But if an entire area, so if let's say the entirety of Gaza is now considered a military target, does every single civilian lose their protections because they're considered human shields?
So in part of what we were reading earlier, I think this was part of the International Humanitarian Law Database for Customary Law. I don't
know if you'll find an answer, because this is kind of one of the debated things. It's a slippery...
Sure, it seemed debated, but like I think they were saying that you couldn't like declare like an entire country, or like it had to be like a reasonable area that was declared. So like for instance, let's say that I walk into New York City and I'm in Manhattan, and somebody in like the Bronx is like shooting rockets at me. I can't say, oh, all of New York City is now a target. Like, I think that has to be like reasonably close. I think that was...
No, but like if you look at, let's say New York City. So in the situation in Sri Lanka, the civil war started in 87. By 2009, there was like, I don't know, a 2-kilometer front left. There was not a lot of places that people could go that was considered a no-fire zone or a safe area that wasn't considered part of the active military zone. So at that stage, pretty much everywhere is considered, just over time, right?
Yeah.
Like a temporal change in the front. So, and we see that happening in Gaza. It starts at the top, then we're moving our way down, then it's Gaza City, now Khan Yunis is being hit, Rafah's being hit. Like the spaces that are no-fire zones are becoming smaller and smaller and smaller.
Okay.
And it's becoming more and more unrealistic asking people to move. And when you're asking people to move, you're then saying, well, they didn't move, so now they are human shields because we said this is now a military front.
Okay.
I know you're saying like no problem, but it is a problem if, as we see warfare turning into more and more, or as warfare takes place more and more in urban environments, there has to be, we can't just be like, well, leave. There has to be some protections for civilians.
I guess what the reason I'm saying okay is that like, I know you're not doing this because I don't think you do this. But it sounds like when you're saying that like, well, now they're all human shields, just because somebody has been turned into a human shield doesn't mean they can be treated as like just military combatants, right? Like they're all taken into account for proportionality sake.
But that's what they say is the contradiction of the human shield, right? To be a human shield, you must have the protection of a civilian, because you must change someone's calculations by having the protections of a civilian. But the second you're classified as a human shield, you do lose some of those protections in that you are allowed to be harmed in war. You are allowed to be...
Wait. Can you focus on that? I've never heard that before. My understanding is that when you're designated as a human shield, you still have all the protections. I'm not aware of you losing any protections.
You couldn't be killed.
No, you can be killed with full protections as a civilian. No, like if you.
I'm fairly sure that civilians have extreme protections not to be targeted. So
wait, hold on. Yeah, to be very, 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 very clear, you can never target civilians. I don't believe you can ever even target human shields. That's what I'm saying. I don't think that there's I don't think you lose any protection. You can never target civilians or human shields, but civilians are always possible to be killed as part of collateral in a particular attack. Same thing with human shields.
Yeah, but you should be taking extreme measures to avoid hurt. Like if you know a civilian is in the area, you should be avoiding that area, right? Like I'm not...
Sure, but my understanding is even for...
I'm not an international law expert or anything like that.
My understanding is even for like human shields, you would still have to take into account like the human shields if you're doing an attack, unless they're like voluntary human shields, in which case some people might make arguments that, well, now they're part of the military effort. But even in the case of like somebody using human shields, you still have to take them into account when you're doing your strikes. Like if you put one terrorist in the basement and they have like 20,000 human shields above them because they're all like people that are in an apartment, you can't just say like, oh, well, they're all human shields, so now we don't have to factor them into the proportionality. We just blow them all up, right?
Yeah, And I know what you were saying before in terms of does it even matter, in that some parts of... So Israel doesn't adhere to hasn't ratified Additional Protocol 1, even though some of it is customary law. But I feel like the protections under civilian... Like if there weren't protections for civilians, then being a human shield as a concept doesn't make sense.
So I think... Maybe protections is a bad word. Maybe it should be like considerations is a better word. Like, I think that civilians always have special consideration, and civilians can never be targeted ever. But civilians might die, whether they're a human shield or not, as a byproduct of a strike. I think that the only time when you're talking about something being quote unquote protected is, I think what we're talking about is the difference between like a military or a civilian target. So like, for instance,
I was talking about Additional Protocol 2, Article 13.1 on the protection of civilian population. The civilian population and individual civilians shall enjoy general protection against the dangers arising from military operations.
Wait. Additional Protocol 2, what thing?
Article 13.
Article
brackets
13.
1.
Wait. Okay. Additional Protocol. Okay. Article 13. Okay, protection of the civilian population. Okay, the civilian population and individual civilians shall enjoy general protection against the dangers arising from military operations. To give effect to this protection, the following rules shall be observed in all circumstances. 2, the civilian population as such, as well as individual civilians, shall not be the object of attack. Acts or threats of violence, the primary purpose of which is to spread terror among the civilian populations, are prohibited, and civilians shall enjoy the protection afforded by this part unless and for such time as they take a direct part in hostilities. Yeah, what if any of this is problematic compared to the human shielding stuff we were talking about?
Well, that's why I was using the word protection, in that civilians get the protection that they shouldn't, like, to all extents and purposes, they shouldn't be the target of any military action. If you're a human shield, you are the target because you're there and they put you into the calculation.
Okay, wait.
They are targeting you.
I think, okay, so maybe this is where we disagree. Or maybe there's like maybe I'm wrong actually. We can flesh this out. So when you say the target of, my understanding is targeting a human shield is always illegal. You can never do that. But you're not targeting a human shield when you're targeting a site that has human shields in it. You're targeting the military objective, and the human shields are considered a byproduct of that. So like, for instance, if there was a building and there were 100 human shields on top and there was like a bad guy in the bottom, and you had a bomb to go and blow up the bad guy in the bottom, that if you were to instead, how would you even make this comparable? Like, you couldn't just kill the civilians on top if it wasn't also going to get the guy in the bottom. You can't target the people on top just because they're human shields. Even if you kill the people on the top, and even if you target the building they're in, what you're really targeting is the military objective of the bad guy. And then the human shields, same as if they were ordinary civilians, are now like in a proportionality calculation, I think. I don't think target
but
means,
all of the laws about human shields, right, say that you can't use this person so that a place can't be targeted.
Correct.
So we know that they're... How do I get my thoughts into words? Mm-hmm. You are essentially, you're going to hit civilians.
Yep.
If you, and I understand what you're saying about proportionality. But see if you can help me get my thoughts out in that the very existence of a human shield means that you're assuming that there are some extra protections that a civilian is entitled to. And it's got to extend past just being like, obviously proportionality and distinction is...
I think that's it. What you just said, I think the proportionality is the only extra protection. So like, let's say there was a target with 1,000 bad guys and we go to blow it up. We just blow it up. That's easy. Let's say there's a target with one bad guy and 999 human shields. Well, now we have to see, like, is the perceived military gain, is it worth the collateral destruction of civilian life? Now you have to do that calculation. That's the quote-unquote additional protection. So there might be, and I think one of the references given is like, let's say there's 3 different military targets. All 3 confer the same advantage. Let's say there's 3 ammo depots. 2 of them have human shields present and 1 doesn't. You're obligated to attack the one that doesn't, assuming you get the same military advantage from attacking any of the 3. That's like part of the quote-unquote protection, I think. Okay,
then I want to ask you in like... human shields in 2 directions, right? Human shields as the actual crime of human shields. Are you committing the crime of using human shields if you happen to operate in an urban environment, or are you just failing to take the passive precautions?
You're probably gonna have to look at a couple of different things going on, but I would assume that, like, in general, the answer is gonna be yes. But I mean, there might be some notable exceptions to this. So for instance, I'm cautiously saying this, I'm inventing a fantastic scenario because I don't know how the Ukrainian operations have gone. But like in the case where in Mariupol or something, if Ukrainian armed forces are operating in a city and they're being invaded by Russia and they're fighting in that city, I don't know if they're like intending to operate around civilians or hoping to gain an advantage or edge by doing that. They're just fighting in that area. Which would mean passive precautions weren't necessarily followed, but you can't say that the intent was there to use those people as human shields. Yeah, and it wasn't feasible otherwise, Yeah. Whereas for Hamas, I think that in the totality of their actions, it seems to be the case, and I guess this would have to be argued, that their intention is to gain an advantage by using said civilian deaths, the fact that they don't report like militant numbers, the fact that they don't report on any of their fighters ever being killed, and the fact that they, dress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that they do seem to try to gain an advantage by co-locating near civilian infrastructure. But I guess that would be the argument that would be made, This is the problem. And then this is the problem in that if you can find 1 or 2 involuntary human shields, does that designate everyone else in that area as an involuntary human shield, even though they were only proximate to begin with? Which is, I don't 100% know. I just know this is super interesting when you look at Sri Lanka. So it's just that I haven't looked at it totally. I just know that the UN found that they didn't use, found that they didn't use human shields. But they did fail to meet their passive precaution because they ultimately just ended up saying everyone is a human shield. So I think that would be interesting because they were saying that the Tamil Tigers were pushing civilians into areas that were no fire zones designated by Sri Lanka so that they could also put the Tamil Tigers there to protect them. Okay. Oh, also, just while I'm here, there's a paper that I think, because people bring up Goldstone a lot, I don't have institutional access to it, but I'm going to put it in DGG chat because if someone does have institutional access, I think it would be really good for them to download it and send it to you. And I'm going to put your name there so it goes blue. It was censored. I can't put. I got muted. Okay, I'm just gonna send it directly to you. I don't have institutional access to download it, but it's a critical look at the application of international human law in the Goldstone report in terms of human shield claims specifically. Gotcha. Jesus. Do you know how many? Just curious. Do you know how many pages this thing is? I don't know how. I don't have access to it. Let me see if it says. Oh, you haven't actually. Oh, right. Gotcha. That's why I said. Oh, it's 347 to 402. So it's 5 pages. 347 to 402. Wait, it's 15 pages. Wait. I can't, maths is not. 55. Yeah, you're thinking like time. I think right now. Yeah, 55 pages. I know. Read it. Yeah. Okay, maybe. I just think if it's a good thing to. Because I know the Goldstone report gets brought up a lot, and I would be interested to see what this actually said because it's a critical assessment of IHL in the Goldstone. Sure. I feel like the biggest issue with the Goldstone report that was really surprising to me was that for a lot of this international law stuff, you have to establish like what's being targeted by the belligerent. So Israel, you have to establish like what they're aiming for, what the objectives are, et cetera, in order to make like a strong determination of if like a war crime has been committed. But I was surprised to find out that at the end of the Goldstone report, I don't think they conferred with the Israeli military at all for any of it. And well, this is the big problem though with like a lot of the reports is that like at the moment I'm fairly sure the special rapporteur from the UN doesn't even have a visa to get in. Like they're not, it's kind of a double-edged sword where you can be like, well, you didn't talk to the IDF or any of the Israeli officials at all. And that is true, which makes it really difficult to determine anything. But then if the IDF or any of the officials won't put forward any information, it also makes it very difficult. Yeah. But then I think at best, then all you can say is that like, this is kind of what it looks like, but you can't make a strong case for necessarily for war crimes. You can only say like it kind of looks like this, so we need more information, or there needs to be a body somehow to compel them otherwise, right? Yeah, and yeah, I think you definitely have to couch what you say, which maybe isn't couched enough. But I think non-compliance with international investigative bodies can't be used as an excuse to kind of discount every claim that's made. Yeah, but I think one of the also confusing things is it seems like, I think I read this for Rome Statute stuff, this is considered to be like supplementary to local jurisdiction. So I think it's a matter of ICC principle that as long as you are investigating yourself, as long as your own country is doing these investigations, that's considered adequate, I think, for ICC purposes. Would we let like countries we don't like get away with that standard? Well, I imagine there would be an evaluation of how comfortable we feel with these countries, quote unquote, investigating themselves. But I also imagine that for the ICC to have any bite, I think that the idea of telling every country that they probably have to submit themselves to the authority of an international criminal court would probably mean nobody would, for every single thing, nobody would just sign up to the ICC. They'd be like, well, fuck that. I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck. I wish I could remember where that was, because I don't know if this was the ICC or it was the ICJ. Fuck. I should have written that statement down. Who did any? No, none of you fuckers remember this. But
Stephen,
what?
sorry, I'm trying to use my calm voice. We don't apply that standard. This is what we talked about the other day. We don't apply that standard in like domestic law, right? Like in a criminal trial. Like you don't have to. The person doesn't have to testify, and we don't need to get anything from them to determine whether or not we believe through the justice system that they're guilty of a crime, right? Or to even, to gather an idea of what their intent was.
You absolutely do. It's a crucial part of charging crimes where intent is a part of the crime. Yeah, it doesn't have to come from them directly, but it has to come from things around them.
No, intent's important. I didn't say intent's not important. That's how we determine things like first, second, and third degree murder, right?
Yeah, that's my point, yeah.
No, that's my point. I'm saying we don't need that person to speak to get an idea of that, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. But you're saying the opposite when it comes to Israel and international law. You're saying, well, if they don't participate, I mean, we can just get an idea, but we can't really make a determination.
That was my point. You can get an idea, but you can't make a determination.
No. I'm saying you can make a determination, and we do that in courts of law, do we not?
Not in places where there could be like completely exculpatory or completely dispositive stuff that you don't have access to. That would probably be part of like the ordinary court process. Like for instance, that house you brought up that keeps getting brought up. I think that was it Goldstone? There were the statements afterwards, for instance, that like a military person, either they thought they saw RPGs going into a house, or there was a misreport from a drone or whatever. If that's the case, and then that house was targeted and destroyed because of that, then none of the criticisms are necessarily applied to it. But we have no way of knowing that. So it's weird to say because we saw a house getting blown up, it must have been a war crime. There's just no possible way we can make that determination. We have no access or insight into the targeting cells of Israel for that attack.
Sure. My issue with that one is that Goldstone was encouraged by the Israeli government leadership to release his information that has proven this, and it didn't happen. And, it's not needed to. It had the effect, his quote-unquote retraction had the effect they wanted it, so they can say that gesture of, yeah, go ahead, release it. We want you to show the world the truth. But they didn't need to, and they were exonerated on the world stage.
Okay,
but my point is that
I'm just saying that we can't just look at things getting blown up and say, oh, this was definitely an intentional targeting of civilians.
That's not how it was done, though. It was a much more detailed analysis. I was hoping it was Pisco, not someone who's going to offer nothing substantive to this, but hello, forethought.
Hey.
Anyway, my whole point was in criminal justice, first of all, the Goldstone report wasn't a judgment against Israel in any legal sense. It was an assessment, right? So as far as if they were to go to the ICC, they would still never have to actually participate in an investigation for the ICC to make a determination, would they?
The ICC wouldn't be able to take Israel to court. They would.
I'm sorry, you're right. They haven't signed the Rome Statute. Yes, I'm saying if Israel had signed the Rome Statute, would they?
Well, wait, Joe, has Palestine signed the Rome Statute? Do you know?
Palestine actually has.
So if Palestine has, if you're committing war crimes on their territory, you're allowed to take belligerents to submit a case to the ICC. I'm almost positive of that.
Even if the other party I'm fairly sure there was a case that Palestine took to the ICC.
But I think the ICJ, South Africa is trying to fight for that. The ICJ ought to have jurisdiction between... I don't know the different statutes or rules or whatever that they use.
Well, it's that the ICJ, like something can be brought against Israel in the ICJ, something can't be brought against Palestine because they're not a recognized state.
It's a little complicated. If it's if it's crimes against humanity, technically, you don't need any signatory. Human rights laws apply to all conflicts and internal conflicts. In terms of whether or not Israel can be brought to trial for certain crimes against, like, Hamas, it depends on whether or not you consider Hamas to be a government of one of the governing bodies of Palestine, and whether or not you consider Palestine a state, and whether or not Iran is also responsible for Hamas's activities. Like it really gets complicated.
Hamas can definitely be taken to the ICC. Like individuals from Hamas can definitely be taken to the ICC. I don't know about the ICJ. Hamas couldn't be taken. Palestine could. I'm not sure about the ICJ because it requires being a signatory to a treaty over which the ICJ has jurisdiction, whereas the prosecutor could, for the ICC, take a member of Hamas to for war crimes.
Correct.
Definitely.
I think the ICC is always individuals. The ICJ is always
The ICJ, I don't know if it was a lawyer or a jurist because, or no, they're the same thing. It was a jurist or a judge because I don't know if they all wear those outfits, but I saw a video the other day of them explaining why. Because people were saying, well, why is stuff being brought against Israel here and not Palestine? And they were explaining that the lack of recognition or something like that.
Oh, it's very simple, is that there's no denying Hamas committed war crimes, but the only jurisdiction that the ICJ had is very much the Genocide Convention, which is why they're not looking at lower crimes, because the ICJ doesn't have any jurisdiction over the lower war crimes. It only has jurisdiction over the Genocide Convention.
Also, I just got here, Silly, are you like a international lawyer?
I am not an international lawyer. I did my undergrad in international relations and strategic security, and I focused on the Middle East, and I speak Arabic, and I worked for the Palestinian delegation back in the day.
Okay.
But
awesome.
Yeah, it's been a while, and I don't profess to have any international law expertise.
Unlike me, who does it every time I come in here.
I'm going to read that paper because someone in DGG very gratefully got it for me, and I'll tell you if there's anything in here worth noting.
Okay.
The one on the Goldstein report. Okay, bye.
Be careful, bye. We are going to use the bathroom. 1 sec.
Finally, Lycan, it's just you and me. Is this what you were hoping for?
No, I was really genuinely hoping for Pisco because I don't think I'm talking out of my ass or saying anything crazy when we make judgments against people based on their actions and evidence that we can find around those actions. And we don't necessarily need, we'll take witness testimony. We'll do surveys of crime scenes and whatnot. We'll make determinations. So I don't think that the involvement of the accused party is necessary.
And this is still over the crime specifically of which crimes?
I'm just saying in general. Like if we were to pick something out of the Goldstone report, because that's Stephen's biggest contention is that, Israel didn't participate. And that wasn't for a lack of trying to get them to participate, but they didn't. And so Stephen says they didn't participate. Therefore, you can only make kind of assumptions. You can't really make any like hard determinations on whether or not they actually did it.
It depends on the crime. So for something like genocide, usually there's a very, very high legal standard for obvious reasons. And the intention is not particularly hidden. So for instance, for the Nuremberg trials, it wasn't like testimony really. It was all of the rail lines that were constructed to ship people into concentration camps. It was the Zyklon B that was manufactured. It was the lists and reams of documentation of who was and was not in concentration camps and who died when and who was responsible. So it's not like you cannot use anything, even if like all of them said they weren't trying to kill Jews. It's just that the standard of the Goldstone report falls very short in a few instances. I mean, even in their press conference on the Goldstone report, when they were asked questions about, I believe it was some sort of specific metallic part in a
depleted uranium, or
no, there was no depleted uranium. That would be
no. I'm not saying there was. I didn't know if that's what you're trying to get at.
No, it was something specific. It was the guy with the mustache that was talking about it, who was talking about munitions, what munitions were used, and he said, on the one hand, the presence of this metal indicates that it was a extremely explosive device that was really not meant for this sort of urban combat. And then in another case, he also said it could also be the case that it was used because it was trying to punch through a certain building at a time, and that it was trying to limit casualties because anything less would be have a lot wider radius of destruction. So it really can go either way. So yeah, and the Goldstone report was very specifically a political project. It was not really a true fact-finding mission as Goldstone insisted it would be.
Wow.
Why
who's
do you
the
say
tier
it
5?
was a politically motivated thing? Because Goldstone, remember, was like very pro-Zionism, a huge proponent of Israel, a Jew himself, a highly regarded individual in government and educational institutions in Israel. So I don't understand the idea that he was politically motivated against Israel.
Oh no, he wasn't. Goldstone's actually a very interesting person, as I've read into more of his work and his work in South Africa and Yugoslavia. Originally, when the fact-finding mission was proposed, it wasn't inviting any investigation into the actions of Hamas at all. He specifically insisted on that, it's that political bias that I think is obvious in that instance when he was taking the job, that he believes has been maintained as after Israel, in response to this report, does do investigations and does publish reports. The 2009 report, I believe I forget the exact title of it. I'll pull it up in a second. But in response to that, I believe one of our liaisons in the UN said that Israel had done its due diligence in investigating accusations of war crime, as is their right as a sovereign state, and they felt that it was undue to continue accusing Israel of being a party to war crimes, especially in light of some of the evidence that was brought forward. And Goldstone felt very similarly, especially when there was very little condemnation for Hamas refusing, of course, to do any investigation into war crimes.
A follow-up report did come out where both were admonished for, there were some things were acknowledged for that Israel had done, but both were admonished. Israel was admonished for not doing enough, and Hamas was admonished for not doing anything. But when you talk about,
when was this?
It was a follow-up to the Goldstone report. It was before the retraction. It would have been, it was before the retraction, so it would have been between 2009 and 2011.
So it would only be in 2010?
Yep.
Yeah, either way, it just became very obvious that it was just one of the political tools used to admonish Israel again. So he just retracted based on the fact that it was just a waste of his time, which is interesting because as a jurist of South Africa, he was very much a pragmatic person and was very aware of political realities when it comes specifically to international law. So, for instance, in South Africa, I believe at the time there were overflowing prisons, so there were these weird village courts where people would get some sort of justice outside the legal system, and it wasn't good. He acknowledges that stuff wasn't good, but it is necessary, politically necessary, to begin establishing and clearing out prisons. And so it's not like he was naive. He knew exactly what he was walking into, which is why he insisted on investigating Hamas. And that wasn't because he's a nice person, but because he hoped that in acting as nonpartisan and by being a Jew, that he could get Israel to abide by international law and join the international community and being a part of the international criminal processes and that oversight. And
those are arguments that I brought up in defense of the report itself, which is that Goldstone is a man of high integrity and was a very accomplished jurist. And then he says, we're also going to investigate Gaza. He has all these ties and affinities for Israel. So, and then he had, 3 other people that worked on the report with him. So one, I see him as, up to that point, a man of integrity. The man, his integrity is an enigma to me after the retraction.
Hold on.
Yeah,
my argument is completely different. My argument is not that he has integrity, it's that he is aware of the political influences that are required to build international law and international accountability. And when Israel has very, very obvious reservations about joining the international community for obvious reasons, and he cannot get that to work, and it becomes obvious later that this isn't a serious use of the legal justice system, the international justice system, he retracts.
So did he retract it because it was a waste of his time, or because he completely...
I shouldn't have said waste of time. I should have said it was a poor use of his political capital, and it wasn't in the interest of building any serious international accountability for Israel. It's just a tool to bludgeon it.
And it had huge negative ramifications for him and his family, right?
I don't ever recall him speaking about that. I do recall him speaking about how it was only specifically for Israel and how he had to insist that it target Hamas, that it also investigate Hamas. I do not recall. I recall him speaking a little bit about insults to his family and how it was a little bit egregious, but I do not get the idea that a judge in South Africa is going to be intimidated by calling him an anti-Zionist or
he was called way worse than that. What's
Yeah,
the
I don't think you know what South Africa was like. It was not roses, especially
No,
for
South
judges that
Africa
were
was-
overseeing like white colonials who were being allowed to like keep land that they took from black people. Yeah, I think he can handle
I'm not even
himself.
talking about that. I'm talking about in the West, and in Israel. The man was a pariah to Israelis.
He lived in
What's
South
the
Africa. Who cares?
when you're a person on the international stage like that, and you have family that still lives or travels to Israel, yeah, it becomes an issue.
So you're saying this judge that was overseeing war crimes in Yugoslavia oversaw the building of new courts in South Africa after the brink of a civil war in South Africa. You think he was like bullied
I think when
into
the Jewish community turns on you to such a degree that the guy who's the Harvard professor, the Dershowitz, calls him akin to or as bad as, if not worse than, it was either as bad as or worse than Mangala. Yeah, I think that's probably going to have a huge.
Yeah, I've read Method Madness too. I know the quote you're referencing.
Yeah, it doesn't matter that it came from Method Madness. It matters that it came from an op-ed from that dickhead. And that was a prevailing sentiment against him. You don't think that's going to weigh on a person? It doesn't matter if you're. It's easy
No,
to
not at
stand
all.
against the slings and arrows when you're charging war crimes in other countries or your own. It's a completely different one when those slings and arrows are coming from someone that, again, he has significant religious and cultural ties to.
That he has no connection to whatsoever. No, I think he's totally fine. He sat in, I believe, on a debate over whether or not the Goldstone report was justified. I think maybe a year or a month before it was actually retracted. No, he was very used to people taking issue with him.
There's a huge. Hold on, stop. No new points because I need to look something up.
Go for it. And that house strike you're talking about, is that the Al Samuni strike?
Yeah, I believe so. Where there were like 100-something members of the Al Samuni family put into a single house.
Yeah, they saw a group of men carrying logs and they thought it was rockets from drone footage in the early morning.
So we said those pictures have never been released.
Okay. I guess Israel just decided to drop a bomb on a whole family for no reason then.
Perhaps. Hold on.
What's up, Steven? How's your day going?
Okay, just reading.
What have you been reading? War crime stuff? I've been at work.
Yeah, I just got linked some stuff through email, and I'm just reading all the stuff about it, get my head around everything more and more and more. Wait, how many hostages were actually taken? Do you know?
Something like 130, was it? Or
It's
300?
200 plus. I don't know the exact number. Hold on.
Sorry, I think it was like 130 were left as of a month or so ago.
They took around 250 people, but an exact count is obviously hard.
Okay. 150 to 250 hostages. There should be an exact number on this somewhere, I would imagine.
Are you looking for something in particular, Lycan?
I am. There were a few things. One had to do with his grandson's bar mitzvah, and there were some issues that his daughter or son was having when it came to going to Israel. I'm trying to find that one. So without even finding all this, like we all know the Netanyahu quote about the 3 existential threats Israel faced, right?
Yes.
And the massive political turmoil that was caused by the Goldstone report within Israel.
Yes.
So I just don't know how you so easily you handwave the notion that that country turning against Goldstone and the people that were, a significant power within that nation speaking out against Goldstone and decrying the impact of the report isn't going to have an effect on someone.
Oh, yeah, sure. So he had been a jurist for decades at this point. He does not live in Israel at all. He lives in South Africa. His family's in South Africa. So he's not really particularly deeply connected to Israel. He is trying...
Wait. That alone, how can you say he's not deeply connected to Israel?
Because he lives in South Africa.
That doesn't mean he's not deeply connected to Israel.
Okay. So what do you mean deeply connected here?
I said he was members of significant political and educational institutions within Israel and a huge supporter of the Zionist movement and he has family there.
Okay.
Like how do you, I just that alone, like how can you say he's not deeply connected to it? If I was deeply tied to any part of if I had a bigger stake in my Italian heritage and I was member, I held a dual citizenship, say, in Italy, and I, had I was a curator for
Israeli citizenship by default. I think that's literally their right of return.
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't bringing that up as like he's got this, so therefore I'm just giving some examples of things where if I have ties like that to another country, how can you say I'm not deeply tied to it? If I am a member of a board, if I'm involved with the politics, how can you not say I'm not deeply tied to that country?
I guess I don't take like his being part of like a Israeli board, like legal board, as some evidence of a deep connection. What would make your argument really good is if he lived in Israel and after the report came out, he was ostracized by his entire professional community, which he wasn't. He was ostracized by friends and family, which I don't know if he had. I don't know if that happened. If he had deep family issues because they all disagreed with him or shunned him or believed he betrayed Israel in some way.
You don't think he was ostracized by the global Jewish community? At the very least, the Israeli Jewish community? Again,
there was a lot of debate over what the Goldstone report was and wasn't. A lot of people
I feel like this, rather than trying to figure out like how connected this, I think the question would be, is there any evidence that like this is what pressured him to change his opinion?
There's a bar mitzvah somewhere that Lycan's going to find, and it's going to prove everything. Hold on.
What is the bar mitzvah?
No, I've already moved on from that.
Okay. Yeah. So
state your question again, Stephen.
Is there any evidence that the reason why he changed his opinion was because of pressure from whatever communities, Jewish or Zionist? Or otherwise?
I mean, any explicit evidence? No.
Or any evidence at all whatsoever?
I think one piece of evidence is the fact that there are two things. I won't quote this correctly, but there was like a draft submitted of the retraction to another newspaper. And there was some issue with it, and it was then rewritten and then resubmitted somewhere else. But it's important that I remember.
Oh yeah, that's purely a Finkelstein invention. I've tried looking for that. I can't find it.
I have the links for it somewhere. I will find that.
Surely.
Don't call me Shirley. And then the other people who wrote the report were not consulted about the retraction. They were exposed to none of the evidence that Goldstone saw, and they still stood by the report after the fact. I think that's a pretty decent, at the very least, to say, curious. Wouldn't you agree, Stephen?
No.
No. Bullshit. You don't think that you were so full of it.
Wait, hold on. Here's what I'm trying to... There's two competing hypotheses. One is that Goldstone saw evidence that changed his mind, and the second is Goldstone changed his mind because of pressure. So for the pressure part, we would need to see, I think you'd have to see a pretty substantial loss to seriously consider this in the absence of any other evidence. So for instance, if Goldstone was working for somebody that was threatening to fire him, or was part of a political party that was threatening to kick him out or something like that, I'm like, okay, maybe, sure. But in the absence of that, then I'm looking for, what is a reason why he changed his mind that was because of pressure.
Have you read the retraction?
I think we did on stream once.
There's nothing substantive in there, and there's still
in the specific retraction, doesn't he specifically call out that household that you talked about being blown up, and he specifically references that there was drone footage that he saw that he specifically says gives them ability to target something that doesn't make it an intentional targeting of a civilian thing? Isn't that?
And then we went through a speech he gave a month or two right before that, where he modified statements.
And you think he was pressured to modify between then?
Yeah.
The Finkelstein idea is that he wanted to get a retraction to get back in Israel's good graces, but another news agency wouldn't publish it. So he had to make it because it was too boring, according to them. So he decided to make it much spicier in his new edition that he submitted to, I think it was the Washington Post. That's the Finkelstein idea.
Wait, what is if we were trying to link a statement by... What is the strongest statement you can link by Goldstone that you think shows that wow, this guy was probably pressured?
He never comes out and says that. And I mean, again,
I'm just saying what are you looking at? It's it looks like he probably got pressure to change his mind here.
Everything that happened to him after that, again, major figures in the Jewish community, the Israeli government, all coming after him. You don't think that that's pressure at all?
Well, where was he born in South Africa?
I think he was, because he's always referred to as a South African. So
if he's born in South Africa, lives in South Africa, doesn't participate in work or politics in Israel.
Why? Wait. Do you not think that a significant number of... again, this is what feels like bad faith on your guys' part, is that I give examples of his connections to political and educational institutions and being a vocal supporter of Zionism, and you say he doesn't really have any strong ties to Israel.
Yeah, in the face of things he said and his motives before, during, and after the report, yeah, that's kind of weak evidence.
Well, I think here's the problem. Is that you're making a very strong claim that he flipped because of pressure, with no evidence. But then there's
I'm sorry. Wait, I haven't asserted that there is clear, concrete evidence. It is my belief that he did it out of pressure.
Sure, that's fine. That might be your belief. Yeah. But
because he provided no substantial pushback. When the United States Congress voted on a resolution denouncing the Goldstone report, there was no evidence provided in that resolution. There was nothing substantive. It was just, this is political. And this is wrong.
What is nothing substantive for what are you talking about? So what would I search for? U.S. condemns Goldstone report. Is that what I'm looking for?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay. Because also keep in mind that another thing is that if I believe everything you're saying is true, that he's this responsive to pressure, why would he even have been agreed to do the Goldstone report? Why would he have ever even been part of it? Wouldn't he just renounce it from the beginning or not even participate?
Say it again?
Wouldn't he just not participate if he was this responsive to pressure? Why would he even participate in this report?
Maybe he didn't expect the backlash to be so severe.
Okay, it's possible, but now, I feel like the competing hypothesis of maybe he just saw things that changed his mind is that's a much easier to buy thing that I don't have to make any other thing up for that I argue.
I'm not making anything up. I'm saying
you're inventing the idea that, or you're supposing the idea that there was immense pressure against him that was threatening him in such a way that he had to change his mind in order to like alleviate the pressure. But I don't know.
Not threatening in it. Just to be clear about what threatening is. I'm not saying that his life was in danger.
No, I'm not saying threat. When I say threat, I just mean like it was causing some harm to reputation, some harm to future jobs, some kind of harm to him, and he needed to escape this. And the only way he could do this was by, I guess, making a statement saying he's disavowing the Goldstone report. But I just don't know why he wouldn't either, one, just not ever participated ever, or two, why can't we just take the competing hypothesis of maybe he actually saw stuff that changed his mind and he was like, oh, well.
Well, when he was given the go-ahead by the Israeli head of the Israeli State Department or something like that, saying we thank Mr. Goldstone for this act of truth and blah blah blah, and we want him to release all evidence that he has seen so that the world can understand the truth in his statement or something like that. Like, and then nothing gets released. You don't think there's an issue with that at all?
Does he have if he was shown stuff by the Israeli military, does he have the authority to release that evidence?
Well, the guy, I assume, as a head of state, I assume that he has, some semblance of understanding of what Goldstone may or may not have been exposed to, and that there's something that can actually be released.
Wait, what? Which guy, head of state?
Like, I cannot imagine. Hold on.
Are you talking about like a prime minister in Israel?
God, I had all these links before. No, it was the head of one of the departments.
Okay. Let me just read this quick. Last night, the House of Representatives voted a whopping 344 to 36, with 22 voting present to condemn the report on Operation Cast Lead in Gaza by renowned human rights investigator Judge Richard Goldstone as, quote, irredeemably biased and unworthy of further consideration or legitimacy, end quote. Goldstone, a self-described Zionist, led investigations into human rights abuses in Rwanda, the former Yugoslavia, and his home country of South Africa. Goldstone turned down the original mandate to investigate Israel and only agreed to participate when he was given a mandate to scrutinize both Israel and Hamas. He found possible war crimes on both sides of the conflict and recommended internal investigations by both parties. Judge Goldstone has been attacked, but as he himself has pointed out, critics in the U.S. and elsewhere have not been able to point to specific substantive flaws in his findings. Watching interviews with Bill Moyers, it's hard to see how such a reasonable person could be demonized by so many. You find the subsequent interview here. Okay, and then it links to his statements here of, oh my God. Congress condemns. This is a thing critical of.
I have the whole text here if you want it.
Yeah, link it. Turn it to me. This is just the House of Representatives thumbsing it down. What are the statements by Goldstone that makes you think that he was like pressured? Or what is the article or thing that you reference in regards to him?
Someone linked this, which speaks to what Forethought already said, but Forethought phrases it in a way as if it's not meaningful. But Judge Goldstone defends role, but feels distressed. Former judge complains that close friends kept away from him, and some family members even had reservations about his cooperation with the UN Human Rights Council.
Well, I thought you were referencing that he like made a statement and then changed it or something.
No, there was a statement when talking about the Al-Samuni house, is that like his phrasing of the events.
I'm sorry, what?
We went through this before. I don't have all
also
these
here
anymore.
Okay, and then so I'm reading this House of Representatives resolution. So it sounded like you said that they just made a resolution condemning it without any statements of fact, or what was your criticism of this?
Yeah, that there was nothing in there. Nothing they provided directly refutes the Goldstone report.
Gotcha. So this says, whereas the resolution prejudged the outcome of its investigation by one-sidedly mandating the fact-finding mission to investigate all violations of international human rights law and international humanitarian law by Israel against the Palestinian people, particularly in the occupied Gaza Strip, due to the current aggression. Was that the initial goal of the investigation, was just to investigate Israel's side?
Yeah, the initial mandate was to investigate war crimes by Israel.
Okay. Whereas the mandate of the fact-finding mission makes no mention of the relentless rocket and mortar attacks, which numbered in the thousands and spanned a period of 8 years by Hamas and other violent militant groups in Gaza against civilian targets in Israel that necessitated Israel's defensive measures. Is that true, that they don't talk about the rocket attacks at all?
Not a lot, but Hamas is in there, but it's very marginal. So,
Whereas the fact-finding mission included a member who, before joining the mission, had already declared Israel guilty of committing atrocities in Operation Cast Lead by signing a public letter on January 11th, 2009, published in the Sunday Times. They called Israel's actions war crimes. Is that true?
I have not read the
Yeah,
Sunday
wait.
Times edition.
Say that. Did you just say that they called actions by Israel war crimes?
No. Whereas
Or-
the fact-finding
or actions
mission
by-
included a member who, before joining the mission, had already declared Israel guilty of committing atrocities in Operation Cast Lead by signing a public letter on January 11th, 2009, published in the Sunday Times. They called Israel's actions war crimes.
I don't know.
Probably.
About
I don't know. But I mean, there are already people in the UN that are saying things that, in the human rights groups that are saying that things they're doing now are war crimes. So yeah, I imagine that someone has already commented on it. But if you're going to make the argument about bias, then, I mean, is it not the role of these people, especially ones that would be appointed to a committee like this, to make that kind of assessment?
that. Well, if
Before
your
even being
goal is
part
a
of the fact-finding mission?
yeah.
No. I would say absolutely not. But whereas the mission's flawed and biased mandate gave serious concern to many United Nations Human Rights Council member states, which refused to support it, including Bosnia and Herzegovina. I can't pronounce this shit. Cameroon, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, the Republic of Korea, Slovakia, Slovenia, Switzerland, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and Northern Ireland. Whereas the mission's flawed and biased mandate troubled many distinguished individuals who refused invitations to head the mission. Whereas Justice Richard Goldstone, who chaired the United Nations fact-finding mission on the Gaza conflict, told the then president of the UNHRC, Nigerian ambassador Martin Higulu, that he intended to broaden the mandate of the mission to include all violations of international human rights law and international humanitarian law that might have been committed at any time in the context of military operations that were conducted in Gaza during the period from the 20th of December 2008 to the 18th of January 2009, whether before, during, or after, a phrase that, according to Justice Goldstone, was intended to allow him to investigate Hamas attacks on Israeli civilians. Whereas Ambassador Umulu issued a statement on April 3rd, 2009 that endorsed part of Justice Goldstone's proposed broadened mandate but deleted the phrase before, during, and after and added inflammatory anti-Israeli language, whereas a so-called broadened mandate was never officially endorsed by a plenary meeting of the UNHRC, neither in the form proposed by Justice Goldstone nor in the form proposed by Ambassador Uhumobi. What do you think that? What part of this, I guess, do you think is like illegitimate, or why do you think that this was not an okay?
Because none of it refutes anything actually provided in the Goldstone report. Like none of the things that Goldstone and the team substantiate through their investigations, none of that is addressed in this resolution. This
It's actually
resolution just
interesting
says,
you say that.
why is that?
One of the big issues that came up, I believe.
Wait,
this
before you
was-
move on to whatever you're going to say, write down what you're going to say
Go
for that. So, whereas the report repeatedly made sweeping and unsubstantiated determinations that the Israeli military had deliberately attacked civilians during Operation Cast Lead, whereas the authors of the report admit that we did not deal with the issues regarding the problems of conducting military operations in civilian areas and second-guessing decisions made by soldiers and their commanding officers in the fog of war, is this not kind of like dealing with that?
No, because they account for that in their investigation.
How can they do that without Israel's cooperation?
Whereas in the October 17th edition or 16th edition of the Jewish Daily Forward, Richard Goldstone, the head of the United Nations fact-finding mission on the Gaza conflict, is quoted as saying, with respect to the mission's evidence collection methods, if this was a court of law, there would have been nothing proven. Whereas the report usually considered public statements made by Israeli officials not to be credible, while frequently giving uncritical evidence or credence to statements taken from what it called the Gaza authorities, i.e. the Gaza leadership of Hamas.
See, that's just a vague statement that they don't actually explain at all.
Well, it's like a House resolution. I don't know how commonly there's like detailed facts as like a part of these. I don't know what the norm is for it. It would be nice, I guess, to see like specific things. But I guess you're saying that they're just like making general statements and they didn't actually believe any of these things, or they didn't have an underlying reason for any of this?
That nothing was substantiated, and yet this also gets cited against the Goldstone report.
Oh, I would never cite a UN House resolution thing against the Goldstone report. Oh, I was just curious why you didn't like it so much. I don't think I would ever rely on anything like this, but...
Stop being bad faith, Stephen.
What?
This doesn't count. It wasn't against Israel. It doesn't count.
What?
Now that's bad faith because I never say any shit like that.
No, I'm just saying that like a House resolution, like to condemn or support, I don't know if I care that much about. I don't know if I ever use these in favor or against. But it looks like the point of this resolution is to attack it, not on the subject matter, but on the bias of the investigators, is what it sounds like, or stuff related to that. No, it does make reference to the material. It just doesn't.
It doesn't go into the detail, I guess. Lycan accepts, but yeah.
Whereas in one
really
notable
into detail at
instance, the report stated that it did not consider the admission of a Hamas official that Hamas often, quote, created a human shield of women, children, the elderly, and the mujahideen against the Israeli military, end quote, specifically to, quote, constitute evidence that Hamas forced Palestinian civilians to shield military objectives against the attack, end quote. Whereas Hamas was able to significantly shape the findings of the investigation mission's report by selecting and pre-screening some of the witnesses and intimidating others, as the report acknowledges when it notes that, quote, those interviewed in Gaza appeared reluctant to speak about the presence of or conduct of hostilities by the Palestinian armed groups from a fear of reprisals, end quote.
So right here, it's one of those things where it's like, again, Goldstone, a skilled jurist leading this, taking that into consideration. I imagine any judgments that they're making is actually considering it. One, they said that he himself calls it out in the report, and two, that they're going to take that into consideration and make judgments based on additional things they find. It's not going to, the buck's not going to stop there. It's not like some Stalin or quote where he says, you know, you tell people shit like that so that they'll believe everything else you say after it. Do we not think that he took that into consideration?
Well,
and this is providing no.
What were the final recommendations made, like in the Goldstone report or whatever?
So, go ahead, Lycan.
That Israel starts to take into consideration the lives of civilians during military operations. Hold on.
Oh, hold on. Whereas the report recommended that the United Nations Security Council, 1, require the government of Israel to launch further investigations of its conduct during Operation Cast Lead and report back to the Secretary Council within 6 months. 2, simultaneously appoint an independent committee of experts to monitor and report on any domestic, legal, or other proceedings undertaken by the government of Israel within the 6-month period. And 3, refer the case to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court after that 6-month period. Whereas the report recommended that the United Nations General Assembly consider further action on the report and establish an escrow fund to be funded entirely by the State of Israel to, quote, pay adequate compensation to Palestinians who have suffered loss and damage, end quote, during Operation Cast Lead. Whereas the report ignored the issue of compensation to Israelis who have been killed or wounded or suffered other loss and damage as a result of years of past continued rocket and mortar attacks by Hamas and other violent militant groups in Gaza against civilian targets in southern Israel.
You know me. Never mind.
No, go ahead. Say Israel should just tolerate rocket attacks.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say, Forethought. Good job.
Was it not what you were going to say?
Nope.
Okay. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that up to that point, I think only 24 people had died. So in comparison to the loss of life and destruction of property in Gaza versus that of Israel, like if they want to say, well, yeah, but what about this? But when it's an order of 1 to 100, I think it seems kind of dumb to make that point.
I feel like I kind of captured the spirit of what you said there.
No, not at all.
Okay.
See, what you try to imply is that I'm okay with the rocket attacks and Israel should just suck it up.
I mean, if it's 100 to 1, don't you think they kind of should?
No, but off the top of my head, I won't think of a good analogy, but I'm sure within literally the last week, you yourself, Stephen, have said something to the effect of, focusing on this when this is the bigger issue. So for them to be like, yeah, but, like you have to pay for the, the man's leg that you ran over, but yeah, he threw a stone at your car and put a dent in it.
I feel like this, I don't know. I feel like this is pretty understandable. Assuming everything listed in this House of Representatives resolution is true, which I think it is. I feel like I remember reading most of this in the Goldstone report. That when you've got a report saying things like, oh yeah, we couldn't talk to Palestinians for fear of reprisals from Hamas, but some of them talked to us, and these are the things they reported. And also, we don't take IDF statements seriously. They're not reliable, but we will take statements from Hamas seriously and consider those reliable. And then
not only will they take statements from Hamas seriously, they will take statements given by civilians in the presence of Hamas seriously.
Yeah.
They did take some statements from Israeli officials seriously. Well, CP Livni goes out and brags about how we acted like real hooligans down there. I think they took that pretty seriously.
Sure, but I mean, like, the report seems like pretty. I mean,
there's a reason there was a warrant out for her.
Sure, but assuming everything in this House resolution is true, it does kind of seem like the report is.
But it's not substantive.
Well, they're not attacking it on substance. Although, no, that's actually not true. Part of it is on substance. Like a criticism of like relying on sources.
I think the one thing as far as the bias, I think that's a reasonable criticism.
Well, not only the bias, but that the data collecting of trusting statements from Palestinian citizens that the report itself says might be under duress from Hamas, and then not allowing any contradictory Israeli statements, and then also relying on and trusting implicitly statements from Hamas about what happened. That seems...
So just to be clear then, we are saying that Goldstone, accomplished jurist, well celebrated, global figure, he kind of just screwed the pooch on this one.
Well, wasn't he part of a body of people on this?
He was the lead. Yes, he was part of the body, but he was the lead.
I mean, in my estimation, he himself admits he's kind of screwed the pooch, which is why he retracted. So this is all...
No. When I say screwed the pooch, to be clear, I'm saying threw all integrity out the window. Everything he's celebrated for in both his skills as a jurist and his ability to do analysis and to collect information and then make assessments off that information, that he just let his integrity and his abilities go.
At the time, he did what he could with what he had. I believe they were there in Gaza for, I think, 5 days total. And he could not get Israel's cooperation, which is what he was really there trying to do. That was his goal from the start, was to get Israel integrating into the international community and into international bodies and international law. He was not particularly interested in calling Israel a genocidal government or war crime-y government. He really wanted them to be a part of the international community.
So he just said they were all doing all these things just in the hopes that, he doesn't really feel it, but if he puts it out there, maybe they'll kind of square up and get with the team.
Okay, my narrative is very, very simple. He accepts this mandate, modifies it because it's biased against Israel, in the hopes that as a Jew he can get Israel to cooperate, and he can turn this report into something that is a legitimate use of the international law and a legitimate use of the UN's resources, and subject Israel to the purview of the international community. And in doing so, is hoping to explicitly get the cooperation of Israel. He can't do that, so he just gets his report from what he can from Gaza, leaves, the report comes out, and over time, more information comes forward, more behavior comes forward from both Israel and the UN, and it shows that Israel is taking these accusations of war crimes seriously, which is why they conducted investigations and held arrests and changed their certain policies.
How many arrests?
I don't know off the top of my head.
One, and it was for stealing someone's credit card.
I know that's not true, and I know the Finkelstein quote you're pulling that from. I know that's not true. Hold on.
Yeah, please, prove me wrong.
It also feels like Goldstone tried to expand the mandate of this a couple times, but it seems like it failed every time.
Oh, yes. There was a IDF soldier that was sent to prison for beating a Palestinian.
When?
I'll just link you the article. 1 second.
He's asking when the soldier did this activity, because if it's going to be like 2017, it's not going to be relevant to what he's talking about.
Well, I'm also going to ask when he went to jail.
Hold on, it's archive.org. Yeah, I pulled all this up when I was reading about the Goldstone report, so hopefully this is relevant. I'm not embarrassing myself. But I believe this was September 2008. Sentencing of the officer for 32 days of house arrest, 64 days of jail, over, I believe, the I believe over allegations made specifically in the Goldstone report. That was just one notable arrest that I decided to take down when I was researching. But yeah, it wasn't just over credit cards. They did take it very seriously, which is why they changed some of their policies going forward. And then they, as time went forward and more information and behavior came out, Israel made changes. UN continued to condemn Israel, did not do anything to stop or condemn Hamas in any way whatsoever. And it just became more and more obvious that this was just a political tool to hurt Israel, and it wasn't a good use of his investment as a political actor or as a jurist and having his reputation attached to that.
Did you link this to me or in chat?
It's in the channel chat.
Zach.
Is Goldstone alive? Can we get this guy on?
I actually did try contacting him.
And he didn't say anything?
Unfortunately not.
Loser.
You'd be surprised how many people you can just reach out to and they'll just contact you. Oh, yes, and then Israel released their 2009 report on the factual and legal aspects of the operation in Gaza. I believe in, let me get the date, July of 2009, so very close to when the Goldstone report was released. And it's 164 pages. I haven't read all of it, but it goes over very specific aspects of why things were the way they were, what targets were selected, what sort of targets they did not choose to attack out of fear of civilian casualties. I believe this is the first, to my knowledge, that they specifically state that the Al-Shifa hospital is a nexus of terrorist activity that they deliberately choose not to attack. Which is kind of weird for a country that is totally okay with war crimes, in your estimation.
I might be wrong about this.
No, Finkelstein is wrong, and you copy Finkelstein, so now you're wrong. It's not like you, really, but it's Finkelstein.
Yeah, it's really dumb, because anything that I'm going to cite ever when it comes to those three operations is probably touched upon in his book. And it has been, because a few things, such as the Goldstone report, a few different articles from Haaretz, Jerusalem Times, or is Times of Israel? Fuck, I can't remember which one it is. Other reports, like I had seen before I got my hands on a Finkelstein book. I started looking at this shit in July of last year. I didn't start picking up a Finkelstein book until this conflict.
So the credit card statement, where did that come from?
Well, that's from Finkelstein. But you said everything. And it's really insulting because, everyone here reads Wikipedia. It's a great place to start.
How much we need to do on-ground coverage of the events in Tarkov?
Every time someone says Steven's just...
Good one, Blaze.
All he does is get shit from Wikipedia. It's like, well, no, if he's looking at things beyond Wikipedia, then that's that. But I think I've proven on multiple occasions, at the very least, that I'm familiar with material outside of Finkelstein's analysis of it.
If you say so. Anything else? Are we good?
Yeah, I gotta go make potatoes.
Love you.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Peace out.